Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a platform to help athletes and other alumni network and connect with each other and tap into various resources in health and finance and career. But more importantly, this podcast is all about athletes transition out of sport. We interview former college and professional athletes, and we talk about their transition out of sport, ultimately into successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. So excited today to have Emily Huston. How you doing, Emily?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Rob.
It's a pleasure. So Emily was a volleyball player at Baylor University, and then she did that, and then she ultimately she stepped away for a couple of years, did some more studying in psychology and things of that nature. But then she got the bug to go back in, and she became a professional volleyball player, which she'll tell us all about. And then after she transitioned out of sports, she got into financial service and some other things. But ultimately, her passion was founding HomeTeam, which we're excited to hear about, and a lot of the great things that they're doing to help athletes out. So, Emily, I always talk about when you were growing up, how did sports shape you leading up into college?
Well, I was always an athlete. I started playing sports at a very young age, and it just was something that resonated with me. And it was how I built community and how I had structure and had fun. And then at one point, I kind of stumbled into volleyball. And once I found volleyball, there was no looking back. I was obsessed with volleyball. I like to say that it was my first love. So, yeah. And then volleyball was everything at that point. So I was hyper focused on my athletic career and pursuing my biggest dreams.
That's great. And so, did you dream about being a professional athlete when you were a kid?
I didn't dream about becoming a professional athlete, but I did dream about playing in the Olympics and playing for USA.
Gotcha. No, that's great. Did you end up playing in the Olympics?
I did not play in the Olympics, but I was on the USA junior national team and ended up representing my country or our country on the USA pipeline teams. And yeah, so that was when I was able to do that. That truly was a dream come true.
That's awesome. And I'm sure at that level too, there's probably so much, probably extra practice and everything that you have to do. You hear the different sports. I was talking to somebody the other day, our podcast this week, it was a swimmer, and just how swimmers are in the pool at 5 a.m. or something the same like that. So I'm sure, especially playing at the higher level that you did with Team USA, I'm sure that that lent to a lot preparing for sports and what would be afterwards.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a whole nother level, and the USA volleyball program is one of the best in the world. So of course there were long training hours and just hyper focus training. So yeah, of course.
How does that work? Obviously, there's players from all different states. Or you just do you have a season where everybody's just coming together from the different states?
Yeah, well, so I'm not sure how things are now because this was over 20 years ago, but they flew us out to Penn State and we had a training camp. I think we had 3 trainings a day. It was just nonstop volleyball. The only breaks that we had were to eat and to rest and to sleep. But yes, they flew in the athletes from around the country and centralized us on campus, and we trained.
Okay, that's great. So let's talk about, now that you're at college at Baylor, were there any programs, and not just like a one day, but like a workshops or classes related to athletes transitioning out of sport?
Not really. At the time, I know, so now I know that there are student athlete development professionals and entire departments that have been built and designed to support athletes in their transition. But at that time when I was at Baylor, I think we had maybe a training on our resume, but that was pretty much it.
Yeah, and I think it's the case. I mean, went to school probably a lot longer ago than you. It's kind of changing. I mean, I think some schools are probably better than others, but I think it's so important. I mean, one of the things that we've talked about at Alumni Direct is kind of getting together resource partners and then going into schools and then offering some type of additional curriculum, and not only for the current athletes, but also for the alumni athletes as well.
I'm not seeing much support for the alumni athletes, so it's interesting that you're bringing that up. This is going to be controversial, but from what I'm seeing in the field, there are these athletic departments are putting a lot of money into the student athlete development, and I've done a number of discovery with these professionals who are working in these departments. And one of the things that they've very consistently shared with me around the nation is that they have a really difficult time getting the athletes to engage while they're a current athlete. And I'm not surprised to hear that. It's really difficult when you're a current athlete with so many obligations and responsibilities, and you have limited time and energy. And it's difficult to see forward 4 to 5 years when you're young. And so oftentimes engagement is low. And in my opinion, that's a missed opportunity. I think resources are being they could be reallocated to to alumni. I also think that if they were able to reallocate these funds and support the alumni, that actually it would end up building a much better relationship between the university and the athlete. As it stands now, there are very few alumni programs that are healthy, meaning that most alumni and development programs are just asking athletes for money. And that is a terrible way to continue a relationship with somebody who's given so much.
Yeah, I agree, and that's most people hear about that. Alumni was a runner in high school and college, but you hear that. So it's all about the funding, which is wrong. And I think even from a recruiting perspective, and we've talked about this before, I think if you're a parent and you've got a high school aged athlete that's getting ready to go to school, and you're looking at say 3 or 4 different schools, I think if you know that one school is not only going to care for your student athlete when they're there, but also as an alumni, I think that's a something that could be great in recruiting, because it's like I've talked to people on the podcast that they just say, I really wish I would have had the education at school. It just wasn't there. And I think to your point, what you're saying is this, as an alumni athlete, I think that's something that the school could give back to those alumni, and then they'd probably be more likely to give back, whether it's in their time mentoring or
Yeah.
financially.
Yeah, that's the missed opportunity. So I think people, so an athletic department in a university, let's just be honest, it is, and call it what it is. It's a financial institution that's really there to generate revenue. And when you go after just money and the dollar sign, truly it's a missed opportunity, because you're you're minimizing that person down just to the dollar, right? But there's so much more that they can give. And to your point, if they have that relationship with the athletic department and with the current players, there are opportunities for mentorship, for jobs, for just so many opportunities beyond the dollar.
Yeah.
So I really encourage people to look and broaden their perspectives when it comes to that.
Yeah, no doubt. So let's talk a little bit about networking, connecting, and especially the importance of doing it while you're still playing your sport.
Sure. Yeah. So athletes, one of the things that current athletes have is relational capital. So, what does that mean? When you're a high profile athlete, or really any level of athlete, you have influence, you have authority, you have visibility. And once you retire, the truth of the matter is that that goes away. You, in some ways, like, you become invisible. I'm not saying that I encourage that. That's exactly actually why home team exists, is so that athletes do not become invisible. But that is the reality of the ecosystem today. So while you're a current athlete, it is important to develop those relationships and to experiment and to start talking to people who may be way out of the scope of like what you think you may want to do, because there's a lot of opportunity and you can just open doors for yourself more easily than when you're retired. And unfortunately, that's just the reality at this point in time.
Yeah, I've talked to agents before, and they say it's the biggest problem is that, yeah, understandably, and like you talked about before, just being youth, they don't nose to the grindstone, blinders on, like, oh, I'm going to be a professional athlete. And then they don't do those things. And then when it's over, they're just expecting, okay, well, here's my 6-figure sales job or whatever it might be. And it's just not there for them. So it is so important to network and connect. And like you said, just having that sphere of influence, I think, is so important. And I mean, we even talked, like, think about going back when you're kids and just your teammates in high school and their parents and coaches. There's a lot. And I think if you just kind of put yourself out there and just have that spirit of giving,
Hmm.
I mean, a lot of times I say, what can I give when I'm a kid or whatever? Well, maybe the person's enamored by sports, or maybe they've got kids in sports that you can help out. So
Yeah,
we definitely encourage that.
absolutely. Yeah. Just to help the younger athlete who may be a current athlete today and, is hearing this, I feel like networking has a really strong negative connotation, and that it's transactional and that you have to be performative and maybe you have to be somebody that you're not. And my message right now is that that's not the case. When I'm networking, the way that I think of it and when I'm most successful is when I'm just meeting another person that seems to share a similar interest. And I just build that relationship. That's all you're doing. Ask them questions about themselves, right? And share a little bit about yourself, but just get curious and try to maintain that relationship over a period of time. And I do like what you said about giving, having a service mindset and helping people. Eventually, the reality is that later on, you can ask for help when you need help.
Yeah, and I think that probably the key word there too that you brought up is relationship, because I think you're right. I mean, sometimes networking has a negative connotation, but if you're building relationships, that's ultimately what you're doing. What about like cross networking between other sports? It's something that, especially the higher levels, you kind of see the football players hang out with the football, baseball, basketball, whatever it might be. Did you see that in getting as a pro athlete as well?
That wasn't my experience, actually. And my experience was that the athletic community was the athletic community and it was pretty inclusive from that perspective. There were some sports that gravitated to other sports, but it wasn't that the football players just hung out with the football players or the volleyball players just hung out with the volleyball players. I think, if anything, it was more that an athlete hung out with other athletes and not non-athletes. That
Which is yeah, and I think that's great because to me, it's a natural affinity, just like you're an alumni from a school or an alumni from whatever it might be. As an athlete, you do have a lot in common. I mean, all of us kind of grew up playing sports and went through the same thing, different sports, but the same kind of thing. So I'm glad you said that, because I think it is important for athletes to do that. We talked a little offline. I do a monthly podcast, networking event, and it's just really cool to see whether it's swimmers or wrestlers, volleyball players, NFL football players, but all rolling up their sleeve and saying, how can we help each other with our businesses? I think it's pretty cool to see that, because they've got a lot in common from the athlete perspective.
That's great. Yeah.
So let's talk about alumni engagement. Obviously, at Alumni Direct, that's important to us, and kind of touched on a little bit before. But when you were at school, was there any kind of push to bring alumni athletes back, and not just for like the homecoming games and all that, but more to make an impact on the current athletes that are there?
I didn't have that opportunity, unfortunately. No, not really. They didn't bring former athletes back to hang out with us or mentor us or yeah, no, I didn't experience that.
Now, do you see any of that today? Like, have they reached out to you and say, like, hey, Emily, come back and talk with our volleyball players or athletes in general?
Unfortunately, as an alumni of Baylor, um, there's been a number of coaching changes, and I think that when there's turnover like that some of the legacy is just forgotten or dropped. So, in fact, I've had some quite negative experiences as an alumni and feeling underappreciated. So, again, it's another missed opportunity to build those relationships, and not only for money, but for opportunities and mentorship and jobs and everything like that.
Yeah, and hopefully more schools will do it. I mean, we've talked to some smaller schools that seem to be maybe a little more focused on that, because they don't have the bandwidth themselves to kind of go and do that, and they do want to reengage alumni athletes. And you're right, it's a missed opportunity, because I think it's got to be a two-way street. And I think part of the problem too you brought up is that with coaching changes or athletic director changes, but still I think it's the school itself should be looking at and saying, yeah, let's do this. Let's bring back alumni to help.
I agree. Yeah. Who I am in touch with is a guy named Mike Miller. He's the director of student athlete character programming, which is the student athlete development program at Baylor. And he and I were having a very similar conversation really recently about how athletes are engaged as alumni. Our conversation very much paralleled this one. One insight that he shared with me, however, was that there is only one or two people in their alumni engagement department, and that's just not enough. So again, another missed opportunity for the athletic department or the institution to allocate funds that, again, would support them not monetarily, but also in other ways.
Yeah, no, that's something we definitely want to have those conversations. So, how about from a alumni perspective from the pro volleyball circuit? Are there connections still today that you have where, because again, you're getting in an elite group there as a professional, where you are still in touch and doing some networking and connecting and alumni type things?
Not really, to be honest. Again, all of these pain points are opportunities for people to build in this space. And I played volleyball professionally in Europe. So most of my teammates are European, and it's been 10 years, since I played there. Um, I'm not in touch with them.
Right. So like if you went to Italy, like you can say like, hey, I'm coming, you got a place for me to stay.
Yeah, I mean, if I was in touch with them, then of course I would feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, I could reach out to them, but I
Right.
haven't.
Yeah. So these are, I don't know if you got a chance to listen to or watch any of the other episodes, but these are my questions I like to always ask. They're not hard, but first question is if you can go back in time, back to the future, kind of like on a DeLorean, and you can give advice to freshman Emily in 10 words or less, what would you say to her?
Wow. Let's see. I'll need some time to think about this one. Okay. If I could go back to the freshman Emily at Baylor, would I would tell her to transfer, which at that time was not something that was common. It was actually really difficult to transfer. I had expressed interest in transferring after my sophomore year, and they basically threatened me and said they would take a year away of my eligibility and that I needed to stay. That, I don't think was a fair situation for me to be in as a freshman though, and as a sophomore. When I requested the transfer or brought it up, it's really difficult to advocate for yourself when you're 18, 19 years old. Obviously, I tried, so I commend myself for that. Ultimately, I would say that I think I would have liked to transfer. I don't regret my time at Baylor. I will say that though, that things didn't pan out in terms of the success of the team that was promised. And we had a ton of injuries, which basically devastated our program at the time. So athletes were being overtrained and undersupported. And it just, and then my head coach was put under a forced resignation. So I do wish that I had transferred. That's probably the only thing that I would do differently from my time at Baylor.
Right. And then obviously today with NIL, that opens up to, common things to be able to do that and to make those switches. How about any advice to senior Emily?
Senior Emily, not really. I mean, I try not to live with regrets, and I don't think that I don't have regrets from that time. Not that you're suggesting that there were regrets, but advice.
Yeah, just in general. I mean, don't worry about the 10 words, just kind of thinking back to, something that might have been, that would be useful today, let's say.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Well, for senior Emily, I don't know. I don't think I have any advice, but I would say for other athletes who are out there who are seniors and preparing to transition is just keep an open mind and continue experimenting and be okay with failure. As an athlete, we're used to winning and we're used to having extreme structure and knowing exactly what we're going to be doing next. And once you go into the real world, it's uncertainty all around you. And so just being okay with that mindset of experimentation and not knowing, it's really important to be comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. And so try new hobbies, try and make new friends, try different types of jobs. You don't need to know exactly what you're going to be doing for the next, 20 years of your life, if even the next 2 years of your life. So just keep experimenting and having fun.
Yeah, that's great. And you probably answered my future question of what advice would you give to athletes as they transition out of sports? So you kind of covered it there, which was great. I mean, it's a lot of people say different things. I mean, I think the one thing that's come up lately is be in the moment and just enjoy your time, because I think a lot of us take for granted. Now, for me, I got hurt my sophomore year, and I wasn't going to be a professional runner or an Olympian. So my transition wasn't as hard, but just kind of be in the moment of enjoying, because a lot of people just don't get that. I mean, one guy was funny. He had played football all 4 years, and he had one more year of eligibility, and he got his master's. But like when he was done playing football, he had the rest of the semester and all that to just like kick back and really do nothing and like really enjoy life, like that he didn't get to do in college because it was so, with everything that goes on with the practicing and all that other stuff. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your transition. So you, I guess, kind of had two transitions. So one, coming out of Baylor, kind of going into the real world per se. Talk a little bit about that, and then we'll forward after that to after professional.
Sure. So yes, I did have two transitions or two retirements. Once I graduated from Baylor and completed my eligibility there, I was really burnt out. I did have offers to play volleyball professionally, but decided not to play and continue playing at the time. Being my proximity to Dallas, I ended up getting a job in Dallas and working for FC Dallas, which is an MLS soccer team. While I was working in sport, I felt pretty torn in terms of what I wanted to do for my career. And so I knew that I also wanted to help people. And I was working in the nonprofit space with children in trauma. So I was doing those two things in parallel. And for the next 3 years, that's essentially the path that I took. At any given time, I had a full-time job and a part-time job. And just knew that those were sport and helping others was something that I was really interested in, but I didn't know how to bring those worlds together. At the time, I was really committed to just starting my life. And I had a strong vision for what that should look like, which being young and impressionable and moving to Texas at the age of 18, I was put into a cultural ecosystem that really promoted marriage and children and a pretty conservative way of life. So once I had graduated from Baylor, that was what I was trying to build. I was trying to build a family. I was trying to find a partner, and those things just didn't develop for me. And then it was about 3 years into my retirement that I became really depressed, and I was really just struggling with the fact that I was just kind of floating around in the world, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. It was just like I felt at that time, I felt like I should have things more figured out than I did. And so, yeah, I was extremely depressed. And in that depression, I was really desperate to get out of it. And I remember telling myself that I should go back to what I'm good at and what I enjoy. And my depressive brain said, well, the only thing you're good at is volleyball. So you should go back to volleyball. And of course that wasn't true. Of course I had many other strengths, but that's what came to me. I also didn't have anybody to help me. I was massively struggling and I felt like it was a me problem. And what we'll later talk about was not, but it's a very difficult transition for all athletes. And I was trying to navigate this transition alone. So ultimately I decided to go back to volleyball.
Okay, and then so now going back to pro volleyball, so now you have had your experience there playing again. What was like that transition like after that? And maybe I guess you probably learned some things from the previous transition that would ultimately help you when you were done as a professional.
Yeah, so one of the things that led to my second retirement and stop playing from volleyball professionally was an abusive coach. And so I think one of the things that I learned to prioritize was my mental health. And again, I found myself in a situation where due to an extremely toxic sporting environment, I was having like really bad dreams. And it was at that point that I decided like it's just not worth it. And so I decided to retire again.
So, and then now let's just fast forward. So that kind of ultimately led to founding HomeTeam. So talk a little bit about that, and maybe I guess leading up to that, how being an athlete kind of helped you to basically become an entrepreneur and founding this company.
Well, there's so many lessons in being an athlete. And well, wait, before I go into that, do you want me to talk about the journey to getting there, or do you just want me to talk about like the transferable skills?
You could talk about both.
Okay. All right. Then I'll back up. Okay, so once I retired from volleyball professionally, I decided to pursue my graduate degree in counseling psychology, and ultimately did not pursue the traditional path for clinical mental health. I was being pulled in another direction and ultimately decided to go where I was being pulled. And I was being pulled into a financial services industry called private single family offices. So I worked in private single family offices and climbed those ranks for about 10 years and ultimately led myself to working for some of the largest private single family offices in the world and getting phenomenal operational experience in that industry. So, and then it was about 10 years into it, I decided that I just wasn't feeling in alignment with myself. And again, I wanted to get back to the core of Emily. And that when I was in the middle of that transition is when I met a former teammate of mine. We had reconnected and she became an author. She wrote a book called Always an Athlete. And her book describes the developmental milestones of athletes from the time that they begin their career, which is, and it could be anywhere from 5 to 8 years old, all the way to the top of their career, which is retirement. And she equated these developmental transitions of an athlete as if they're climbing up a mountain. And when she got to the stage of retirement, she said it's as if the athlete falls off a cliff. And her book ended there. There were no next steps. There were no resources. There were no best practices. And what I realized is that this is not a critique of her. It's a critique of the current athlete ecosystem. And it goes back to what I experienced. When I was an athlete, when I retired, completely alone, had no next steps, had no tools. If anything, I was actually behind my non-athlete peers. And that's what we see today. So it just blew my mind that today's athlete is experiencing the exact same thing that I experienced nearly 20 years ago. And so given that I was in this moment of transition, I saw an opportunity to change, to create change. And so this is how HomeTeam came about is, I have the live experience, I have the operational chops and quite a deep understanding of athlete mental health.
Okay. And we're going to talk about HomeTeam in a minute, but then from just an athlete or say DNA or skill set, how that translates into becoming an entrepreneur or business leader.
Yeah, being an athlete is the best thing ever. And I think it really gives us a foundation to be able to explore so many different pathways in our lives. As an athlete, you have to be resilient. You have to know how to strive and set goals. You have to know how to bounce back from things. And that's what entrepreneurship is all about, it's not just an easy path. You have to create your own path. And that path is not straight. It's non-linear. It's full of tons of twists and turns. And so when you're able to take those transferable skills of resilience and drive and community building and all of these things, then it really enables you to be able to carve your own path as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I agree. It just, there's so much, and even just in general, like you talk about, even jobs, people want to hire athletes. They want to hire the best people, but just like what you brought up, I mean, there's just a lot of things that an athlete, the preparation, the practice, the leadership and everything that goes in, the drive that makes an athlete attractive to employers. And we tell athletes that just, don't look and worry about your resume of, okay, well, I didn't have an opportunity to do an internship in college because I was playing my sport. Your being an athlete is part of your resume. And definitely when you're talking to people from that perspective, do it. And then again, that entrepreneurial journey, it's a grind. We all know that. We've all kind of, the ones that have been entrepreneurs go through it, but having that athlete background definitely helps out. So let's talk about HomeTeam and some of the great things that you're doing there.
Yeah, so HomeTeam was born out of the situation that I had found myself in, the story that I just told you. And so we focus on retired and injured athlete mental health. We have a community of clinicians and multidisciplinary providers that are in the athlete ecosystem. And the reason that we do this, we're building this community, is because there are systemic gaps in the athlete world, the business side. And what happens is that there are these professionals who are highly trained, highly capable, they're former athletes themselves, but they're not working together. They're working in their own little silos. And so one of our missions is to fill that gap. And so by building this community, we've brought together clinicians and professionals in the athlete ecosystem from around the country. And continue to bring them together, not only for community and networking, but also for ongoing training. The other thing that we're looking at building is a platform that centralizes athlete-centered care. Today's athlete has a number of different needs, not only as a current athlete, but also a retired athlete. With NIL and the transfer portal and just being a normal human being, there's a lot of complexity. And so my experience and the experience of all athletes who retire is that there's a systemic failure, and that's why we're talking about this today, right? Is that there are no transitional support services. And so, well, there are. Let me step back. There are support services, but they're fragmented. You don't know where to find them. It's difficult to find somebody who relates to you. And so this platform centralizes all of the existing resources around the country in one location so that athletes can get connected to athlete-centered services and care.
That's great. So then do the athletes, and you have all the different clinicians and all that, do the athletes then join the community and then they have access to all these different people that can help them?
The athletes are able to get access to the clinicians via the platform that we're building.
Awesome. That's great. And how do they find it? Is it something that, obviously, is there an app for it, or is it just going on the internet? Like how's that work?
The platform where we're centralizing all of the existing resources has not come to the world yet. We're actively building it, but by going to our website, www.hometeamgo.com, you can find information and pathways to join the community.
Okay, that's great. And then obviously it's worldwide. So
yeah, we do have members in different countries, and yeah, we welcome all countries and all backgrounds.
okay, that's great. No, I think it's so important to realize that, and that's kind of what started my journey on this podcast, is just seeing the struggles that athletes have, and we always talk about we want to make an impact, and I always say like one at a time. Obviously, want to make an impact on a lot more people with the podcast and other things that we're doing. So, how can people find you?
By going to the website, they can find me there. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Emily Huston at HomeTeam. And if you're joining our community, then that's another great way to message me and get in contact.
Okay, great. And you said it's hometeamgo.com?
It is, yeah.
So you definitely need to reach out, because I think Emily is doing some great things, and it's important. It's definitely an issue. You could find us at alumnidirect.com. The podcast is on our YouTube channel, and it's across all the podcast networks. And each week I talk about the great nuggets that I get from the athletes that are on here. And Emily shares some great ideas and thoughts and just ways that we can help athletes. So definitely encourage people to watch and listen. So Emily, thanks again. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
My pleasure.